So, hi, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Unpacking Possibility. I'm your host, Tracy Stein. And as always, I'm so happy to be here with you. And I'm so excited to introduce you to Christie Rocha. You're going to love her, and you'll see why soon enough. So, among other things, many other wonderful things, Christie is a self-described Jersey girl, millennial, mom, wife, and she is the creator and host of the Sass Says podcast. So I'm going to tell you a little bit from Christie's bio, but then I really want her to help you get to know her a little bit better. So Christie, as I mentioned, is the host of Sass Says, but the purpose of this podcast is really so important because it's aimed at guiding women on how to heal, educate, and empower themselves through therapy and through real life stories of perseverance, including Christie's own. Christie interviews mental health professionals. I was on her podcast and had a great time. Experts, coaches, and women who share her mission to debunk the stigmas and misconceptions about therapy and mental health. Yay. Christie's known for asking the but how questions. I think that's so great. So that her listeners walk away from each episode with things that are actionable, not just, live better, but how to do that. So she talks about relationships, motherhood, body image, ambition, and what she calls the intangible. And I love that. Self-care is also a hot topic on her show, as I mentioned. And Christie and her husband live in New Jersey with their 2 toddlers. So without further ado, Christie, welcome to the show.
Thank
you. So good to have you here.
I know. It's so good to see you and be back chatting.
Right. So I think we last spoke, honestly, last summer, almost a year ago, when I was a guest on your show.
Yes.
And I'm so glad that you're here because you really bring so many things to the table that I think can help people, and especially women, learn how to balance, things that seem sometimes impossible to juggle well. And you really are so honest about talking about your own journey. You say on your website, I'm not a therapist, but I have one, and you should too. So I don't know if we should start there with you talking a little bit about your journey and how you wound up creating this podcast.
Yeah. So thank you for that. And yeah, you know what? I was just that person on paper my whole life that had it all together. I was the stable one. I was the one checking off all the boxes of, okay, graduated high school, got into college, graduated, got a job, met a guy, got hitched, bought the house, had the kids, kept just checking off all the boxes. And ultimately I got to the end of that sort of, hey, check, and realized I still was not completely fulfilled. I wasn't entirely happy. And I was looking around kind of wondering why. I'd done everything I was, quote unquote, supposed to do. And it wasn't that any one of those areas was making me unhappy. And it wasn't that, my marriage wasn't happy or that my kids weren't loving and wonderful. It just, as a whole, I couldn't put my finger on it. And I didn't grow up thinking that therapy could be for someone in that situation. I didn't understand that therapy could be for someone who just wants help, that just wants to talk, that just wants to understand themselves better. I only knew people that went to therapy if their parents were getting divorced or there was a major loss in the family, or, as I got older, maybe there was eating disorders or, severe depression, things like that, that just felt like I don't have any of that. I don't fall into those categories. So almost like I don't want to take a spot away from someone else, or, I can't justify it. And I was, my mom actually was listening to a friend of hers on another podcast sharing very similar sentiments. Everything looked good. Everything was good, generally speaking, but she shared that she had a therapist and that it was such a healthy way to vent and to just hash out even problems she was having in her business with her clients and things. And it just started to transform the way I viewed therapy. when you combine that with where I was in life, so postpartum with my second, quarantined with a toddler, and just really struggling, really down, really having that, decision fatigue, the burnout, the overwhelm, it just was like, okay, I need help. Like, I can't keep pushing it off. I can't keep thinking I'm going to power through whatever that means. And I got help. And really where the show comes from is that this was all such brand new information to me that all of this whole world was available to me. And I thought, you know what? There's another Christie sitting out there feeling like her life is really good, but it could be better, and not knowing that therapy could be a tool to access whatever it is she wants in life. So let me bring this out there. Let me talk to the therapist. I say I'm not a therapist, but I have one. You should too. I think if you want it, therapy can be for anyone, right? If you don't want it, then it's probably not for you. But if you want it, it can be for you. And I just think that it's a lovely thing. It's so valuable. It's so warm and fuzzy. I had therapy this morning. I feel better, Let's just all get help and talk about our stuff,
I'm so glad that you're talking about this, and you're talking with such honesty, because, I think you're right. There is such misunderstanding or such stigma about what it means to either go for therapy. What does it mean? Like there's something so terribly wrong with you? No, it means that you're a human being and that we can all feel and do better. Mm-hmm. Right. But then there's this other side of that myth that's like, you haven't earned it, or you're not deserving if it doesn't feel like, literally your house is coming down around you. Right. But you talk about things that are so relatable, like postpartum, like what it felt like for people across the board to be quarantined. Mm-hmm. And on your show, you also, again, I love your honesty because it's so refreshing and so relatable. I know you've spoken about things like having a great job and not leaving because of anything bad, but because it was the right thing for you at the time, but feeling like, oh, who am I now that I have done this?
Yeah. When I had been with my partner for, I think 5 or 6 years before we got married. And then as soon as we got married, it felt like this whirlwind of a year or two where, we were living in Boston, we got married, we got pregnant a few months after our wedding, decided to move closer to family, which meant moving to New Jersey. Couldn't find a house. We lived with my parents for a year. And, that was fun. So grateful for them. Also, because in that time we welcomed our daughter. So we had 4 extra hands around, but it's a lot of dynamic between your new husband and your parents and then your baby. And after my maternity leave, I left my corporate job and I was feeling it all. And that all happened within about a 1.5-year time frame. And then just to add to that, it's not, it wasn't happening at the same time, but right a week after my daughter's first birthday, we pretty unexpectedly lost my sister-in-law to cancer.
I'm so sorry.
Yeah, thank you. And she was young, she left behind 2 young kids, and, it happened fast and it hit us hard. And that was all coupled into that. And I found myself saying all the time when I was feeling overwhelmed, when I was feeling sad, when I was feeling, just lost, really, like that total identity crisis of, okay, I have this baby. This motherhood thing looks nothing like I thought it would. I left the corporate job. I'm working from home thinking it would be easier. It's not, and anytime I would feel overwhelmed, I would do this. I call it like pile on, right? Like I would just, all of a sudden I would spiral and be like, and this, and this, and this, and my sister-in-law's dead. Like, and I And I don't say that now to be flippant. I say that to say that's truly how I would think. I would go down the spirals of, I don't know who I am, and my sister-in-law's dead. And it was like, that was also a big sign to get some help, because, not everything was about her, but that was a big emotion and a big event that I could sort of tack things onto. And it was almost helping me to keep pushing under the rug the day-to-day discomforts, the day-to-day loss of identity. It was like, when I can't figure those out, when I can't get to resolution on that, I sort of just pin it on her passing. And I got to a point where I was like, this is unfair to her memory now. Like, I need to figure myself out. And yeah, I a lot of change. And even when I say it now, it's like, wow, first world problems, it's, privileged problems. It really is. And it's uncomfortable sometimes to talk about it. But when I do, I hear from so many other women, particularly who are in the same place and also feeling the same guilt or shame around even having those feelings. Like, I'm not talking about having a job or not. I'm talking about changing jobs. I'm not talking about, being homeless or not. I'm living with my parents. We're looking for a home. Like, these are really privileged experiences that I think are hard to talk about as being dissatisfied with or having areas of discomfort or, challenge. So.
But I think it's so important that you talk about that, because on the one hand, look, it's always good to, be able to shift our perspective. Mm-hmm. And I think that's what you were, doing on one level, saying, okay, in the context of how bad things can be, could things be worse?
Yeah,
sure. But the thing is, the stress that you're having is the stress that you're having, and it doesn't minimize the impact on you. It is hard to live with family, even great family. Most people would say, oh, a year, that's kind of a long time. It's a blessing to have, wonderful children, but they're also, a lot. And, you're talking about lots of significant transitions happening around the same time, happening in the context of a pandemic, happening in the context of loss. Mm-hmm. So, it's important. I think what your podcast does is really lets women know that it's okay to just acknowledge what it is and what it feels like, and that you are entitled to go get some help.
Yeah. Yeah. That was a big part of my experience with the early, months of therapy, was just getting to a point where I could give myself permission to say, what's real for you is real for you. It doesn't matter what anyone else is going through. It doesn't matter who else did it and handled it differently. This is your life. This is how you're responding and coping, or sometimes not responding and coping. And this is how we, meaning my therapist and I, we're going to help you move forward. We're going to help you sometimes move backwards to move forward. But, it was hard. It's hard to, I don't know, that permission word it just hits me a lot, because, I had to give myself permission to ask for help. I had to give myself permission to then, once I was receiving the help, to truly let it in, like, it's all the different steps, and just saying, okay, it's okay. You're okay. It's okay. It sounds simple, but for me, it was not.
I'm thinking back to what you said a few moments ago, and what you've said on your podcast and on your website about, you really had very successfully, like, I think you mentioned on paper, this is certainly not to take away anything from the things that, the many things that you've done and done quite well. I mean, you worked really hard, and you got into a great college, and you graduated, and you got a great job, and you were really good at it, and you formed a lovely family. And it's like, the model is kind of like, I can make everything fine
Yes.
or good. And in many times we can. Something that struck me, I was listening to one of your episodes this morning, was that one of the things you talked about is also realizing that it's okay not to be going, doing, achieving every moment, that there are times when it's okay to just, it's like the doing is in the being.
Yes. Yes. That's still a tough one. Especially, in jumping forward a bit and doing my podcast and doing all the things that I'm doing on social media and collaborating and things, it's I'm trying to choose my words carefully because of how I internalize it, right? And how I'm trying to reframe this process. But in this season of life with toddlers, with, this isn't my full-time job. My husband also works full-time. It's in this season of life, this progress can and will only move at a certain pace. And that has to be okay.
Same with your podcast.
Yes. If I had done this prior to kids, maybe even prior to getting married, I'd probably be on like a billboard by now, because I would have just pushed it. And I think, yeah, we're in this cycle now at home where, like, thankfully my kids are in school a couple days a week. And that is so that I can put time and effort towards the podcast also for their benefit. But, then every other week they come home with a new sickness and we're all sick. So in times where my life and the lives that revolve around mine are in flow and in alignment, that's when I really try to focus and put effort and time into what I'm doing. And whether it's me or it's my kids, things are out of alignment, out of flow, or sick, whatever's going on, that's when I have to really talk myself through taking a step back. And because I know that flow time will come back, and I'm not happy about it. I'm not like, woo, I get to take a step back from my passion for a minute. Awesome, right? Like, it's not easy. It's not fun. I don't like it, but I'm much better off when I do that, because the alternative was when I tried to push both and I'd burn the candle from both ends and I'd burn out truly. And no one and no version of myself on either end of that candle was happy. So, it's hard. I don't know. It's hard. I don't like it all the time, but I have to do it.
It is hard. And it's such, it's such an important thing, though, for all of us to grasp, is that, because I think something you're getting at is, you didn't say this, but I think a lot of people might feel like, oh, I feel like a failure if I am not rocking it 100% of the time. Mm-hmm. And it's very hard when you have very competing demands that are very different. Parenting is it's an intense demand. Mm-hmm. And it's one that, of course, is wonderful, and it's a labor of love, but it's not one where it's like a 9 to 5,
right.
And it isn't predictable. It isn't like something where you can schedule when the kids are going to get sick.
Right. Or just like be cooperative, like I used to be able to, when I only had one, I used to be able to sit in her playroom with her on my computer and work. Not for very long, but I could do it. Now with two of them, that for me has become impossible, mostly because I'm not happy doing it. It's way too chaotic. I cannot focus. And, mainly when my son doesn't have my attention, it's like he knows and he just makes it impossible for me to do anything else. But yeah, I had to shift that. And I think, we've been saying about my life on paper and such. It's, yes, there were major mile markers defined by achievement. And they were defined by achievement in very, visible, tangible ways. You go to college, you get a degree. You get a job, I got a promotion. My main job every day is being a mom, and no one is high-fiving me for changing another diaper. And no one is going, wow, you know what? You rocked that sensory bin this morning, even though it ended up getting thrown off the table, So the podcast is also a way for me to find achievement and fulfillment in a way that works with my life now. So.
And it's really good. You have really interesting guests. You have really interesting topics, and they span a range, even though they're all under this umbrella of, kind of living your best life in a way that feels authentic to you. But, and I don't mean living your best life like, on the French Riviera with a cocktail and beautiful Instagram photos of it. Maybe that will be part of it, but
eventually.
But I mean, just if I can, just a little tangent from there, as you mentioned social media, your podcast, I think your social media posts are terrific. And I highly encourage people to follow you.
Thank you.
am like totally not, I have no game in the social media world. But I think part of the thing that compounds the feelings you're talking about of like, oh my God, like I'm supposed to be so much happier with what I've got, or doing it 110% all the time, is that you can't scroll through your phone and look at what, the friends and colleagues and acquaintances are doing and not feel like everybody's doing it well.
Yeah.
Even though, of course, that's not true, that it's 100% of the time.
Right. Or it's like, they're doing one piece really well, but what are the other pieces looking like? They're not showing you those. Right. Or, yes, I appreciate you acknowledging my social media, because a lot of times it feels like I put stuff out there and it's like, hello, anybody home? Anybody there? But also, that is, look, I enjoy that aspect of it. So that's easier for me to find motivation to do. Right. But there's also a very just logistical point of that, in that when I am with my kids, I can be on my phone in an app creating an image, and I can do that without a lot of focus. And if it's not the Picasso graphic, I'll go back to it later when they're not around to tweak it. But there aren't a lot of other aspects of my business that I can do when I'm with them.
Right.
So I can diddle around on Canva for hours, while they're doing Paw Patrol and whatever they're doing. So it's both. I enjoy it, so I do make the time, but I'm also in a season where I do a lot of, Susie at Busy Toddler calls it sittervising. I am sittervising my kids. I'm sitting there watching them, but I don't need to be actively involved. So they're too young for me to really be out of the room, but they're old enough to manage. So it's like, what do I do? All right. Sometimes I read, and other times I'm on Canva on my phone, so it's a product of my day-to-day, my reality. Yeah. But the social media is tough. It is, because, you hear it all the time, right? You see the highlight reel, you see the really, you see the high production stuff that people want you to see, and you don't see the rest. So I try to show both when I can, but, when I'm feeling down or when I'm really struggling, it's not exactly what I want to do. Pick up my phone, you know what I mean? And be like, hi, I'm struggling, like it's just not, sometimes I try, but it's not the information.
You're doing good self-care, and that's what you're advocating for other people to do. And honestly, I think it's much more therapeutic to have someone, or in a space that's just yours, than to share every, you see on social media that sometimes people, overshare. And
Yes.
maybe there, some people would say there's no such thing, but I don't know how satisfying it is compared to just being like, okay, why do I feel this way? And what can I do?
Yeah.
And with that, I want to kind of get into more about some of the things that you talk about, because I just feel like it fills a need that's there that a lot of people didn't even know that they had. We talked about, wanting to normalize accessing mental health care. And I think you really do that, and you do that well. I'm wondering if you've gotten feedback from people, friends or fans about, hey, like I never realized it was okay for me to go pursue this.
Yeah, that's interesting. I have heard a few. I have had a few listeners that I don't know reach out and either ask for recommendations, which is interesting. And I've also, I plug every now and then if a show hits particularly well, or if I'm getting a lot of positive feedback, particularly around motherhood, I will put it in some of my township Facebook groups that I'm a part of.
Oh, nice.
And say and I'm active in them. It's not like totally random. But I will put them in there and say, hey, hey mamas, like this one's hitting really well with mothers. Just wanted to share it with you, blah, blah, blah. And I will get feedback that way. I have to tell you though, I do believe that I'm not immune to the fear and the stigma and the misconceptions, in that this is funny. I went to my high school reunion, and it took several women until about 10:30, 11 o'clock at night, when we were ready to leave after a bunch of drinks, to say, hey, by the way, I listened to your show and I love it. And I was like, why didn't you tell me earlier, blah, blah, blah. They're like, it's just scary to talk about. And I don't know, it just felt kind of heavy and weird and blah, blah, blah. And it's like, oh my gosh, like, everything I'm working against. Like, if there's anyone you should, and I would hope feel comfortable to like be shouting from the rooftops that you're listening and that you're getting something out of it, it's me. Like, I want to hear it, but I say that to say, even someone like myself, who's not a therapist, who, isn't claiming to be any sort of expert, who is saying, I'm learning right along with you, in hopes to make it not an intimidating space, I still find that people are shy and people are scared to either admit or openly admit, like whether it's to me or publicly, whatever, that they're listening and that it's helping them.
It's just, isn't it amazing that we have so far to go still?
Yes.
Right? Because people will talk to people they don't even know very well about, a physical ailment.
Yeah.
And,
right.
Most people are going to feel depressed or anxious at some point in their lives for longer than just a few moments.
Right. Like, I wonder if my show was just strictly about pregnancy. Would women out there still feel like they kind of need to be in the closet about listening? Because the thing is, I see the numbers. I know people are listening, so, or like something totally different. If I had a show about fashion, would you be like afraid to tell me that you listen, or afraid to tell someone else that you listen? And it's just been interesting, and it's definitely giving me something to think about as far as like a new, I don't know, just made the goal very personal. It's like, like, how can I rectify this in some way? So yeah, it's a shame, but we're working on it. We're working on it.
I was going to make a joke and say by the next reunion earlier in the night.
Yes, I hope so. And if any of them hear this, like, keep listening, please.
Listen and share it.
Yes.
Life isn't meant to be, seamless and easy. We would love it to be. That's not the stuff we usually learn the most from, right? But I mean, So interesting.
Yeah.
But you are so honest about stuff that I am sure that lots and lots of people, including people from your high school, but just generally can relate to, just we talked about the identity shift, how difficult it is to juggle multiple demands, finding out kind of what it is you want to focus on, like what it is that will make you happy. And I chuckled to myself because I heard on one of your episodes how you talked about receiving the book, What Color is Your Parachute? Mm-hmm. So in 1992, when I graduated from college, I think somebody recommended that book to me. So it's been around. I'm assuming it's been updated quite a bit since
That's amazing.
Then. Yeah.
What a coincidence. That's so funny.
Yeah. But I mean, I don't think very many people have a completely seamless trajectory of what it is they want to do, even if they used to.
Yeah. No, I mean, I think, just to kind of tie the last topic, and I think with this one is that, I also saw prior to starting this, the amount of women who, I just feel like we're in like the season of the side hustle, right? Like we're in the season of the side hustle. We're in the season of turn your passion into your work. If anyone sees or hears you doing something well, they're like, you should find a way to get paid for that. You should and that's a wonderful concept. It's a wonderful idea, but it also made me feel like in my corporate job that I did really well, that it wasn't enough. And I believe and know that I was ultimately raised in such a way and held beliefs to know that I wouldn't have stayed there forever. I really wouldn't have. It wasn't where I was meant to be. And I come from a family of entrepreneurs. Like this is what we do, right? My mom has a podcast. My parents built a business themselves. Like, I didn't want to be behind a desk working for the man. So I would have gotten out, right? But it's like you're in your suit at your desk, and then on your lunch break, you're scrolling through and you're seeing women go, I didn't know what I wanted to do. I just started posting on Instagram my outfits, and now I'm a multi-gazillionaire. And you're like, what could I just post on Instagram about and become rich at doing, and so it's you have to I had to differentiate between the desires. Is a desire to get out? Is a desire to do this? And what is this? Do something else. What is the something else? I'm not going to leave. I'm not going to get out without knowing what I want to do next or have something lined up. But yeah, that parachute book, that changed everything. From there, I was like, all right, got it, done. Let's go. Sold. Yeah.
That is awesome. I'm laughing at what you said a moment ago about, somebody posted this thing and now they're a gazillionaire. Every time I watch Shark Tank, I think like, I could have thought.
Yes. Yeah, but that's exactly it. Right. Yeah.
But even if I did, I wouldn't know how to take it from there, from A to Z. So
I know.
It's amazing. Now, along your journey of self-exploration and navigating these transitions and redefining and clarifying self-care for yourself, mm-hmm. One thing that you have brought into the fold of or under the large umbrella of self-care is what you refer to as the intangible. Mm-hmm. And as you know, I'm right there with that. Mm-hmm. But I'm wondering if you want to talk a little bit about your journey to appreciating the intangible and what that means for you.
Yeah. So that really comes from the root of that is my upbringing. And I shared this with you on our interview for my show that from a young age, I was exposed to the Silva method, Jose Silva, and my mom's aunt who taught her, was doing a lot of mind exercises, mind control, with us kids. It was like, let's bend spoons, and we also, what she was doing really, I know now, was teaching us to meditate. But I didn't know that's what it was. But she would have us sit around and we'd go to these beautiful, places, I don't know, parks, gardens, and things like that. And we'd sit and she'd just tell us to close our eyes, and she'd essentially guide us through a meditation. And, that was all very normal for me, even then throughout my childhood, my mom would, remind me of that and help me call upon, there were different, I think I even shared with you, it was like, we had these like mirror exercises in our mind where it was like, you had this blue mirror, and in the blue mirror, you'd put all of the things that were challenging you and that were hard and that you didn't want and this and that. And then in the white mirror next to it, you'd picture what you wanted instead and this and that. And I was a child, so forgive my sort of like general vagueness of this, but the idea was that you're visualizing and you're manifesting and, like all of these things. So, it's always been there on my brain cells, and I've always been interested and into it. And just as an adult, as life got busy, I sort of moved away from it. And that's why I really wanted to make it part of my show, to reel it back in. And I also, I also feel like the same way that it happened to self-care. It's like, I feel like in part because of social media, I don't know, it feels like there's like a little club kind of thing. It's like, if you're into manifesting, if you're into, like, I'm feeling like, I don't want to use specific names, but like that, it can feel very intimidating, to sort of to start to learn about manifesting and mindset and intuition and spiritual guides and things like that. Yeah. I don't know. Maybe I have to edit this out because I'm fumbling over my words because I didn't want to, I was about to get specific and I was like, maybe not. But all right, let me start. Hold on. Let me start that over.
And honestly, I don't think it was bad. I think these things are challenging to talk about because there's not this like commonly accepted vernacular for talking about these things. And, it's not like, here's an apple.
Yeah.
You right. You can hold it. So to me, like, I actually think you're navigating this in the most real way possible.
Okay. Well, you can leave in or take out as much as you want. I'm good. But yeah,
I've had my cats walk through the podcast. So, this is like,
this is a safe space.
A safe space for everything.
Yeah. I think it's just, when I said along the lines of self-care and social media and this and that, at least what I've seen is that it's almost like there's a very particular person who's on social media, who's living this life of this intuitive person or this spiritual person. And I'm picturing just like a totally like boho, like up in the morning with her green juice, and just kind of like, it's become kind of a personality trait or something. And if you don't know what it's about, or you're not sure, I don't know, it just feels very hard to have the confidence to push through. And so, I just wanted to have people come on and break those walls down and be like, you know what? It's not what I've learned. I'm so sorry. I'm all over the place. What I have learned is that spirituality, intuition, all the things, mindset that I put under the intangible is whatever you want it to be. It does not have to be, as you were just saying, it's an apple. And it's that for a reason, right? It's not going to look the same for everyone. But until you know that, you don't know that. So you have to get into it a little to start to figure it out.
And I totally hear what you're saying. And I'm going to add something that will make me sound like, I'm trying to think, I don't know if it's Scrooge or what, because, I mean, people who know me are starting to know that I'm, I hate to say, the new age kind of, label, but, it's the best, quickest way I can describe it. Like, I believe, as you do, in the intangible, I believe that we have some, not complete, but ability to affect change in our physical world by our intention. But I also think that there's an interaction between our intention and our desires and this kind of intangible, spiritual kind of ether, and this kind of need for mundane action and thought and clarity. This is where I'm going to sound a little bit like Ebenezer Scrooge or whatever, is that, you didn't say this, I'm saying it, so I should edit myself out, but it's like these days you can't throw a rock without hitting 500,000 people who are selling you on, if you do this affirmation or mantra or drink this juice, you are going to have a private jet and look like you're 35 when you're 150. And, maybe somebody's doing that. But it's become very, what I'm saying is spirituality, I think, has become very commercialized.
Yes.
Or unfortunately reduced to, a 30-second reel or a glossy Instagram. And it's not that isn't okay, but I actually think it makes it more intimidating and less accessible to a lot of people.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. And the commercialization is where I was feeling, and that's the word that I needed to use for it, as far as the connection and tie to self-care, because that is what has happened to self-care. It's become commodity driven and commercialized, and marketing geniuses everywhere are trying to just get us to spend money. And it's the same in the spirituality world now, to some extent, right? Not everyone, not everywhere, but yes, exactly your point. Like, do this with me, sign up for this with me, and you'll have the big white house, But that was interesting too. Like, I had Chelsea Rife on my show, and it's funny, she caught a glimpse of my vision board behind me when we were interviewing. She's like, "What you got on there?" And we looked at it, and she's like, "Listen, your vision board is your vision board, but I want to say something to you that might help you, when you're about to do the next one or whatever." And she's like, because it had all of those cars and houses and things on it. And she's like, all of that's great. She's like, but I want you to think about the feeling behind those things.
Yes. What
is that? And that's what you want on your vision board. The feeling behind that. And for me, that's choice. That's, financial freedom. That's, just luxury. And I can have luxury in other ways. I can have choice in other ways. I can have financial freedom in other ways. Like, it just, she's like, yeah, cool, G-Wagon, but like, really, like, and I don't even know that it was a G-Wagon on mine, but it was something. It was totally something. And it was a Chanel bag, and it was the big house. And, it's really just, I want the choice to do it, So anyway, it just, it's a misunderstanding. It's a very misunderstood world until give yourself the chance to get into it.
And again, I don't think there's anything wrong with wanting those things and believing that you have the potential to achieve both the feeling and the objects. And that the universe sometimes sends you something that will help create the feeling that is different from the way you pictured it.
Right.
And what do I know? Like, it's an opinion. Right. But I think that I do think that there are things, and we talked about this when I was on your podcast. Like, I think that there are things that happen that are very uncanny. I can't tell you how many things throughout my life and in my life and for other people, where stuff happens that it's like, like, it sounds like it can't be true. And it is, because, somebody has really set their intention on something, and, manifested a change in themselves, in their worlds, in their situation that has brought them joy. The thing that makes me, kind of like, oh, come on. When I look on social media, not to blame social media for everything, but is that I don't think for the most part, most of the time, that it's like putting the quarter in the gumball machine and the gumball pops out.
Right.
Sometimes I think it probably is.
Yeah.
But the flip side of that expectation is that, oh, if it's not happening, what's wrong with me?
Yeah. Yeah.
But I love that from early on, your aunt and your mom instilled in you this kind of this ability and understanding of an appreciation for visualization and meditation. And actually what you described with the two different colored mirrors is a variation of a very well-known hypnotic technique. And it does work. And it does work for people, and it does help people feel better quite rapidly.
Yeah. It's funny. I mean, I used to do it all the time when I was younger. And then she also had us pick out a male and a female mentor. And it could be anyone. It could be like famous person. It could be anyone. And I chose my cousin Anthony and Avril Lavigne. and
I love it.
And her point was that they should be people, you want them to be people that embody qualities that you admire and that you look up to. And she would say, if you're confused, or you have a dilemma, or you just want to chat and bounce something off someone, go down into your meditative state and talk to them. And I'd probably change them now that I'm an adult, but it's
no offense, cousin Anthony.
Yeah, no, Anthony might stay actually, but it's like, it was the idea of really just tuning inward, and talking to myself essentially. But you were saying something about about when, we're putting that quarter in for the immediate result. The other thing that was the thing that was coming to mind for me was, and I tie self-development and, spirituality and intuition and the intangible very closely together. And so to me, the quarter in the machine is, I want the quick fix. I'm not willing or ready to make it a part of my life. And that's what I've been trying to come back to, right? Is, I believe all of this, but I want it to be a more regular practice, a more regular feeling in my day to day. And, I do it. Like, what does that even mean? I feel it and I tap into it during major life events. I always have this saying, things just work out for me. And whether that's good or bad, like if something seemingly bad happens, it's like, well, okay, somehow this is going to work out in a different way, or this is failing because it's supposed to. Or if it's or if I want something, it's like a really easy example was college. It was like, where am I going to go? Am I going to get in? And I just like, things work out. And so I live by that. But I found that I was really only tapping into it when it was like, it really, really mattered, and it's like, no, I can do this on the day to day. And that's less of that quarter in the machine. That's like, no, you got it. Okay, if you want to put a quarter in the machine, that's fine, but we got to do it every day. We got to put the quarter in the machine every single day. So anyway,
I love that you're saying that, because it's not as exciting an analogy, but it's like, you want your muscles to be stronger so that you can do the heavy lifting. You got to exercise regularly. Lifting the weights once isn't going to do it. It's just going to, and you're going to be really disappointed and fatigued.
Yes. Yeah. That's perfect. Yeah.
But, you know, as much as I have poo-pooed the, again, the commercialization of this or the oversimplification of it, I agree with you. I really do believe that both for psychological reasons, but also from this kind of energetic spiritual point of view, that those affirmations, they create positive change, and it's okay to not feel them 100% every time you say them.
Right.
And, so I love that you had said on one of your shows that you use affirmations, and that you do it regularly.
Yeah.
The meditations you were doing way back when laid the groundwork for you to be thoughtful and receptive and to be able to step back, not just focus in. But I think both spiritually and in a more mundane, psychologically helpful way.
Yeah.
You said something in one of you on that episode about leaving money around your home to facilitate abundance. I'm down with it. I'm going to start doing it.
I'll open a random drawer and there's like $1 in there, and it's just this simple. And I sometimes my husband will catch it, and I'm opening a drawer, like anyone can see me right now. But sometimes my husband will open a drawer and he'll look at me and I'll be like, "Money is there in abundance for us. We're open to receive it." And he's like, "Okay."
I love it.
Yeah. Little reminder.
It's really important. I mean, because think of how often whether you want to think about it as just in a more mundane way or in a more esoteric way, we manifest stuff we don't want all the time. Look at, and you've alluded to this, like we focus on the stuff that's hard. We base our future expectations on what feels hard now. And then everything starts to kind of look crappy, So there is value to saying, wait a minute, I'm going to wind up where I'm supposed to be, or I'm doing everything I can to make this one thing work, but it might be failing anyway. And that there might be some reason for that. And I actually think that's very adaptive.
Yeah. Yeah. You know what? I've been able to do that with areas of my life that I feel generally confident in and generally positive about. And I think where the last couple of years has taken me is, and why sort of this need to sort of reel everything back in, is that I've entered phases and gone through things in life that I'm either have no experience with or no confidence in. And I'm going, whoa, this is new. I don't know. I'm not as clear on how to tap into those resources in this manner. And I think something that I've learned on my show that's been really interesting is that, and I'm gonna mess it up a little because I'm not a scientist and I'm not a doctor, and maybe you can help me, but basically what I've come to understand is that our brain doesn't differentiate between our thoughts as being what we want and don't want. So if we're just focusing on something, our brain doesn't know if we're focusing on it because we don't want it or we do want it. All it knows is that we're focusing on it, and so if it's, I don't know, for me, it's had a lot to do with body image. And so my brain constantly being focused on sort of the negative aspects of body and food and this and that, I've had to really focus on that and go, okay, no, we have to, yes, like manifest, but really it's just think the spin, think what we want, because I'm just having my brain focus on the negativity all the time. And I'm not a be positive all the time person. That's not me. You know that. I know we all need to feel the things, and I feel them all the time. But as far as what we're thinking about all the time, it's like that was different for me. And that was something I didn't realize, like by just like the thing that's just coming to example is like, I don't want to be fat. I don't want to be fat. And it's like, all my brain is going to focus on is fat. And it's like, well, that's not what I wanted to focus on. I wanted to focus on health. I wanted to focus on energy. I wanted to focus on, you know, life and livelihood, and no one can see me either, but like, I'm just moving my hands and going like, just, the good stuff, what's, am I making sense? It's like,
I mean, you're making perfect sense. And, I don't know if I will necessarily lend so much of the scientific piece to what you're saying, but when you were talking, it was making me think of a few different ways of thinking about that. Because here you are, you're saying, well, I could either be thinking about what I don't want, or I could be thinking about what I do want. Mm-hmm. I could be thinking about how bad something feels, or I could be thinking about something that is enriching in some way. And actually, I'm just thinking like in cognitive behavioral therapy, we would want to help people reframe something, because that does change what we notice. It affects our mood. It absolutely does. Shifting those thoughts also changes the behaviors we may be more likely to make these things that we do want a reality, right? Because if we're really thinking about the stuff that makes us feel awful, I'm going to use your example of like, oh, and who hasn't had these thoughts, right? I mean, especially women, of like, oh man, it's a pandemic and I've gained X pounds, or why is,
these clothes not
way
fitting.
Yeah. And the thing is that it can be very demoralizing, and it can actually make it harder to feel like, oh, I'm going to get up and get some exercise, or, you know what, I'm going to have some ice cream, but I'm not going to have this whole thing.
Right.
I'm just trying to think of like examples people might relate to. I think most people can relate to that. It's important to remind ourselves that we're worth taking good care of ourselves, and that there's so much more to us than the things we might be viewing in one way that might not even be objectively negative.
Oh yeah.
But it does. You're so right. It affects our mood. It affects our likelihood of making a different decision.
Yeah.
It's much more motivating to be loving to ourselves. And no, I agree with you. Like, it's hard to be, singing zippity doo dah all day. That would actually be alarming, maybe.
Right.
Right. but from a hypnotic point of view, because as somebody who does a lot of hypnosis, my thought as you were talking is, I was taught that the subconscious, right, the language of the subconscious, that part of us that daydreams, that dreams at night, that is taking in information all the time behind the scenes, but has a lot of effect on what we do, think, and feel. It's very symbolic. Its attention goes where our conscious attention goes. And it doesn't understand negating words. So
right. That's what I was trying to say. Like, the do not want to be fat. Like, that's not, it doesn't get that as a no. It's like just the fat part.
Absolutely. So, I think you're really skillfully choosing how you want to feel. Easier said than done a lot of times, but, and you're using techniques quite intuitively yourself that can help all of us feel better and do better and live better.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And I just have to say, because I have spent a lot of time listening to conversations like this, reading books about this stuff, and I would not be me if I didn't add, I don't always like it. And it's not always easy. And it angers me sometimes to feel like I have to put in so much work to just exist. And, because I would hear these types of conversations and think, oh, good for you. That's great that you can do that. And it was just the place that I was in, right? It's not a knock to anyone who I'd listened to, they're doing what they're doing. And it's so helpful, whoever they were at the time. But when you're stuck, right? Like, and you're just hearing, and that's kind of where like the but how came, right? Because it was like, I would just hear, here's what you got to do. Here's what I do. And I'm like, great, how do I do it? You know? So it's not always, it's really, truly not always like this walk down the nice, pretty lane with butterflies. It's like, I got to do this again. All right. You know?
That's completely true. Completely spot on.
Yeah.
I'm so glad you got to the but how. I'm mindful of the time because I know you have a hard stop soon,
Okay.
but I wanted to make sure I could talk to you for 3 more hours because I just find you so authentic and what you're doing is really important. Seriously.
Thank you.
A few points that you want to leave listeners with. It could even be 1 point. It's whatever you think you want to leave with them as the but how. Even one, and where people can find you.
Okay.
And your podcast.
Okay. Well, the big thing there's 2 big things that I needed to hear when I was stuck. And I think, just going off of what we were just saying, I'll start with that and I'll say, you're not failing if you need help. You're not failing if you ask for help. And help doesn't have to look for you the way it does for someone else. So for me, it's therapy. For you, it might be a coach. For you, it might be, I don't know, a particular, I don't know, Reiki, I don't know, but it can look for you how it needs to look. It could be a yoga class, we'll say that. And I really had a hard time with that failure piece. I just, it was like, why can't I hack this? And the thing is I've also learned through my show is that we're not actually meant to do anything alone. We're wired for connection. We're wired for love. We're meant to be in communities of people. And I don't know why that was so hard to understand and accept, right? But if I can help you realize that, but before you're in the place that I was, that's what I want, and if you're hearing this, and I'm sure your audience is, maybe steps ahead of this already, but I also tend to suggest if you're maybe not ready to seek out a particular form of help, what did help me in those sort of, dancing around it phase was listening to podcasts, checking out some books, mainly podcasts for me, honestly, because I was walking a lot and this and that, but tap in and dip your toe in a way that doesn't require anything from you. There's so much out there now that you can start to kind of get a feel for how it would be once you actually pick up the phone or send the email without committing to anything. So, and you can certainly do that on my show. You can do that on this show. And there's so many other great people doing wonderful things out there, but you can find me everywhere at Sass Says. My website is sasssays.com. My podcast is Sass Says, and it's on all the major platforms. And I am most active on our love to hate it Instagram and TikTok at Sass Says. So.
I love it. And I will put in the show notes, the contact information for you.
Sounds good.
But Christie, thank you so much. Honestly, I think it's great what you're doing, and you're doing it so well. And, it's so enjoyable to get to connect again.
Yes.
So I really appreciate your taking the time to do this.
Thank you so much for having me. It was such a pleasure.
Wonderful. So this has been another episode of Unpacking Possibility. If you like the episode, and I'm sure you do, please remember to like, share, and follow. And until next time, be well.